Ladies and gentlemen, guests, friends, thanks very much for coming to the opening ceremony of the intersection of Jefferson and Palladio. I will give a few words in Italian because we are in Italy, we love our language, and we would like to use it at least for a few words of address. Gentili ospiti, benvenuti. Benvenuti a questa cerimonia di apertura di un convegno che nasce quasi un anno fa, quando il professor Rosner dell'Università della Virginia ed io abbiamo osservato che nel 2019 l'Università della Virginia avrebbe compiuto 200 anni. La nostra Università di Padova fra 2 anni compirà 800 anni e abbiamo capito che assieme avremo 1000 anni di scienza e di storia assieme. E allora abbiamo iniziato un percorso assieme che recita esattamente così. Ispirata dal bicentenario della fondazione dell'Università della Virginia, questa conferenza unisce l'interesse condiviso da Thomas Jefferson e Andrea Palladio di creare un ambiente salubre attraverso il design e l'architettura. Ed è proprio di questo che parleremo nei prossimi giorni. La conferenza a carattere multidisciplinare vuole riproporre questa questione nel nostro secolo tramite il confronto diretto tra esperti in vari settori che si scambieranno idee sul tema. Il dibattito sullo sviluppo di un ambiente riconosciuto come socialmente e fisicamente salubre ed equo è necessario per sviluppare gli strumenti utili a comprendere la struttura dell'ambiente circostante e a incoraggiare la formazione di specialisti che si occupano dello sviluppo dello spazio che ci circonda. Quindi io do il benvenuto a tutti i nostri ospiti e gli amici americani a nome della Università di Padova, a cui mi onoro di appartenere come professore ordinario, e anche a nome del professor Rizzuto, magnifico rettore che oggi purtroppo all'ultimo momento non è riuscito a liberarsi per raggiungerci qui. Ma mi raccomanda di mandare un grande saluto a tutti quanti da parte del nostro Ateneo, dove peraltro questa mattina abbiamo firmato un memo of understanding con l'Università della Virginia. Un benvenuto anche a nome del nostro magnifico ospedale di Vicenza e del nostro Istituto Internazionale di Ricerca Renale. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again for joining us, and especially to our American friends. Many of you come from Charlottesville and the University of Virginia, but we have also an American community here in Italy that is proud to join this nice community this evening. The meeting was somehow born a year ago when Professor Rosner and myself started to think about making some celebration within the celebrations of the bicentennial occasion for the University of Virginia. I think that nothing like architecture and medicine together represent a wonderful example of multidisciplinarity that can play a role in the healthcare and in the healing mechanism for patients. And we will discuss this topic in the next 2 days. We were fortunate enough to have experts from UVA and Italy that will actually gather together to see how much architecture and medicine can contribute to the well-being of the individual. I want to give the welcome of our rector of the university, Rosario Rizzuto, and also from our hospital in Vicenza and our International Renal Research Institute. The collaboration with Professor Rosner and the University of Virginia started approximately 20 years ago. We made approximately 50 publications in important journals, 6 books, and many conferences together, and we have been visiting UVA and Vicenza periodically, teaching our fellows and residents with the attempt to improve medicine and the way they take care of our patients. So without further ado, I will give the word to my friend, Professor Mitchell Rosner, who is the chairman of the Department of Medicine at the University of Virginia, and then we will follow up with some presentations to end with the small concert prepared by the Vicenza Conservatory. Thank you very much, and Mitch, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudio. It is really a great honor to stand in front of all of you and to welcome you to this course, these next day and a half that we'll be together. I think, Claudio said some important welcoming remarks, but I want to add to what he said and maybe challenge all of us in the next couple of days. Certainly we live in a challenging world, a challenging time, and our goal, our hope is conference and to celebrate the 200 years of the University of Virginia and our friendship together was how can we work together to better the human condition? How can we make the lives of the people that we interact with better? And how can we do that together? And I would challenge all of us in the next 2 days to really think about that and think about ways in which we can collaborate differently, to think about how we can really improve lives. And there's many ways that I think we can conceive of doing that. And I think we have many, many brilliant minds that have come together and will be together for the next day or two to really begin friendships, collaborations with that goal in mind. So I'd ask you to think about that, think bold, think big, challenge ourselves really to think about ideas that maybe will transform the lives of people that we interact with. It is really such a great pleasure and such a great honor to welcome all of you and to thank you for your participation and really to also celebrate our friendship. And really, thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to Claudio and we'll have some presentations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. I just was informed that the representative of our region could not join us, so we move forward with the presentation of Francesco Rucco, who is the mayor of the city of Vicenza. Francesco, please.
Buonasera a tutti, benvenuti. Sono particolarmente orgoglioso da sindaco della città di Vicenza, da presidente della provincia, che una università prestigiosa come l'Università della Virginia abbia scelto questo territorio per festeggiare questa importante ricorrenza dei 200 anni di storia. L'Università della Virginia e l'Università di Padova, e di questo va ringraziato assolutamente il professor Ronco, che ancora una volta è artefice di scelte importanti che hanno anche una ricaduta importante sul tema della medicina e direi in assoluta simbiosi con l'architettura, in particolare quella palladiana, che come sapete bene ha avuto un'influenza importante anche nella crescita degli Stati Uniti e in particolare del territorio dell'architettura, diciamo così, americana, sicuramente più recente rispetto alla nostra, quella rinascimentale. E devo dire che con altrettanto orgoglio che affronto il tema tra la figura di Andrea Palladio, che chiaramente questo luogo simbolo, come la rotonda, come la basilica, rappresenta per noi un patrimonio culturale e architettonico incredibile e che stiamo cercando di portare nel mondo, e grazie anche alle attività dell'Università di Padova, del professor Ronco, e grazie alla collaborazione con l'Università della Virginia, oggi supera i confini nazionali, supera i confini europei per arrivare quindi oltreoceano. E sicuramente, come ben sapete, Jefferson, il presidente Jefferson, aveva come punto di riferimento Andrea Palladio, i 4 libri dell'architettura che hanno ispirato Jefferson anche nella sua attività, anche nella costruzione del patrimonio architettonico che oggi è simbolo anche della politica americana di un paese, e che vede in Andrea Palladio appunto un protagonista fondamentale. Questa amministrazione comunale fa di Andrea Palladio un simbolo mondiale che quindi va assolutamente valorizzato, e in questa direzione stiamo lavorando. Io do il benvenuto a tutti gli amici americani qui presenti. La comunità americana è una comunità presente sul territorio vicentino, con cui collaboriamo come amministrazione comunale e provinciale su moltissime tematiche quotidiane. Sono due comunità che da tantissimi anni condividono appunto una convivenza assolutamente costruttiva e civile, e intendiamo percorrere questa strada in questa direzione. Io quindi auguro agli amici americani intanto il benvenuto e un buon lavoro in particolare al rappresentante Mitchell Rosner, al dottor Rosner, che è qui in rappresentanza appunto dell'Università della Virginia, un buon lavoro per queste giornate costruttive, con l'invito a far visitare gli amici americani che non avessero avuto l'occasione, che per la prima volta oggi sono qui a Vicenza, di visitare le nostre bellezze, in particolare quelle della città, ma anche le nostre ville palladiane sul territorio provinciale. Grazie a tutti, buon lavoro.
Grazie Francesco. Thank you very much to the Mayor. And it's now the turn of Professor Gaetano Tiene, Emeritus at the University of Padova and actual President of the Olympic Academy, and nobody better than him can explain to you exactly what it is.
Grazie. Buonasera a tutti, io mi chiedo scusa se vi parlerò prevalentemente in inglese per onorare la presenza dei nostri ospiti, tradurrò qualche passaggio più significativo anche in italiano. Bene, authorities, guests, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure and honor for the Olimpic Academy of Vicenza to welcome you to the Teatrum Olimpicorum. As designed by Andrea Palladio, inaugurated in 1585. Today we celebrate the influence and the view that Palladio had on Thomas Jefferson, who was also an architect, by the way, not only a politician or a barrister. Well, he had been never in Vicenza. Incredible. But he know everything of Vicenza. And introduced in Virginia and then everywhere, scattered everywhere in the United States, the Palladian style, which will be the topic of lecture of Professor Guido Bildramini, who is coming. Palladio was one of the 21 founding fathers of the Olympic Academy in 1555, 30 years before the building of this theater. We were just in the middle of Renaissance, with the revival of art, freedom of thinking, as well as interest on natural philosophy and science. Among the 21 fathers, the majority were scientists. Okay, so in 1976, and here we are, Jefferson was the writer in Philadelphia of the Declaration of the Independence of the English colonies from the Great Britain, which is certainly a milestone in the history of Western countries. Let me read the start of the document, which is followed then by a list of 27 usurpations made by over the colonies by the king. Listen. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, we hold, listen, that all the men are created equal. Ve la traduco in italiano perché è fondamentale. That they are endowed by their Creator with certainly unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Solo l'ultimo pensiero. Dice che pensiamo che tutti gli uomini sono creati uguali. Siamo 100 anni prima, quando finì la schiavitù, che sono ovviamente hanno un carico dal creatore con certi diritti inalienabili. E cosa sono questi diritti inalienabili? La vita, la libertà e il diritto alla felicità. Tenete presente che il documento di indipendenza sarà seguito poi dalla Costituzione, il Bill of America, dove si dice che l'America non è fondata sul lavoro, incredibilmente, ma è fondata sulla ricerca della felicità. E sono due punti di vista diversi. Bene, well, but there is another link between Philadelphia and Vicenza. In 1764, August 7, by the way, is my name day, a young doctor, John Morgan, from Philadelphia, during his journey in Italy, stopped in Vicenza. Following a visit to Venice and Padua, where he met also Giovanni Battista Morgagni, professor of anatomy. Listen, what wrote Morgan when he arrived here? We are Wednesday, August 7th. This morning, we visited several elegant palaces built by Palladio, the Teatrum Olimpicorum, executed after the manner of the ancient by the same Palladio. Of the latter, I procured a pretty exact plate. Sentite, questa mattina, 7 agosto 1764, ho visitato molti palazzi del Palladio e fra questi il Teatro Olimpico, che è stato costruito secondo lo stile degli antichi, dello stesso Palladio, e mi sono procurato addirittura una piccola copia. Bene, andiamo avanti, è breve e finisco. John Morgan had been sent to Europe to learn medicine by Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin had the program to establish a medical school in Philadelphia. Morgan graduated in Edinburgh and became fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in London in 1763, where Franklin was at the time the representative of English colonies. When back to Philadelphia in 1765, Morgan set up the first medical school and college in America, well in advance to Boston, inspired by the views of the great Morgagni. 1 year later, I visited the library of the college. Surprisingly, I found the original book, De Sedibus et Causis Morborum per Anatomia Indagatis, that Morgagni donated to John Morgan with this dedication. I like that the dedication, written by hands of the author of the book, Giovanni Battista Morgagni, said, Viro de re anatomica benemerito. A questo uomo benemerito dell'anatomia, che si chiama Giovanni Morgan. Incredibile, avevano lo stesso nome e cognome. Bene, siamo verso la fine, mi scuso se porto via un po', ma vale la pena. Allora, the book of John Morgan, A Discourse upon the Institution of Medical School in America, which was published in 1765, he defined there the medicine, the guardian of life and guardian of health. La medicina è il guardiano della vita, della salute, who was a revolutionary since for the first time he distinguished physician, surgery, surgeon, and pharmacy, pharmacist. So it was a revolution, Copernican revolution. Well, the relationship between Philadelphia and Vicenza, Padua and Venice will be celebrated this year on October 9, 15. The memory of Thomas Jefferson and his time will continue in Vicenza forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Per capire le relazioni fra l'Università della Virginia e Vicenza basta dire che l'edificio principale, la biblioteca dell'Università della Virginia, si chiama la Rotonda. La villa di Thomas Jefferson si chiama Monticello. È praticamente una specie di inno alla vicentinità. E devo dire che la collaborazione con questa università straordinaria ha avuto un'ulteriore spinta qualche anno fa, quando mi hanno gentilmente chiesto di essere professore onorario presso quella università. Quanto Thomas Jefferson voleva insegnare era la capacità per un medico di cogliere tutti gli aspetti del paziente, non curare la malattia ma curare l'uomo, e pertanto avere una particolare attenzione alla multidisciplinarietà. La multidisciplinarietà è esattamente il contenuto di quanto andremo a presentare qui, e in particolare farò una lezione sulla sinestesia del paziente, cercando di capire che tutti i sensi del paziente sono coinvolti in una esperienza tremenda come quella di un ricovero ospedaliero, per il quale bisogna cercare di ridurre al massimo lo stress, partendo dall'udito, evitando l'inquinamento acustico, il tatto, offrendo possibilmente superfici e lenzuola e cuscini adeguati, magari massaggi, eccetera, anche l'olfatto, procurando un'aria fresca e pura, il gusto, evitando diete che sono scostanti, e in generale la vista, evitando quegli ospedali tristi e beige che abbiamo visto nel passato. I think Thomas Jefferson was a visionary because he wanted to take care of the man using all possible senses, and this explains the content of my lecture in this meeting, which is dealing with synesthesia, the possibility to take care of the patient using sight, tactile sensation, the smell, hearing, and the sight. And I think that this will explain why architects and physicians should be working together in order to try to heal the exceptional sensory experience that the patient may experience when it comes to the hospital. I would like to ask, in fact, now Luis Nelson to join me here at the podium to speak a little bit about the bicentennial concept and this meeting. He is the Vice Provost of the University of Virginia, and we want to welcome him with a nice applause.
Good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to thank you all so much for coming, and I bring greetings from the President and the Provost of the University of Virginia, both of whom are incredibly excited about this program and look forward to the product of the new knowledge and education that this event promises. I'd like to thank so much the organizing committee, Doctors Rossner and Ronco and Andrew Johnston, who've worked so hard for more than a year to put together this weekend's program. We're really grateful to them for their hard work. We're also grateful to the representatives from the Bicentennial Commission, especially Bobby Battle and Carrie Evans, who've done a great deal of work to make this event possible. So much hard work goes into that. This, in many ways, is a product also of the celebration of our 200th anniversary. For us Americans, that's a pretty exciting threshold. We were just at the University of Padova, which is coming up on its 800th celebration. So we have a long way to go before we can, of course, meet the Italians. But Italians have, for so many years and for so long, been an inspiration to those of us in Charlottesville. Thomas Jefferson himself spoke of his beloved friend, Filippo Messi, who inspired him with his ideas as early as the 1770s, as well as his wines. Thomas Jefferson was deeply moved by Italian ideas, Italian architecture, the architecture of Andrea Palladio. When he was, of course, in Paris, he made it as far as Milan, and for reasons that will forever baffle those of us that are architectural historians, chose not to come just that a little bit of distance to Vicenza. But he didn't. Yet he remained deeply inspired by the work of Andrea Palladio, and Andrea Palladio plays a critical role in the formation of our new nation, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia. So much of what we think of as the architecture of democracy finds its origins in the ideas of Vicenza. So we're deeply indebted to you all. We're also grateful for the longstanding friendship between our two doctors, and we're so grateful for that commitment to reach beyond national boundaries, because of course in their endeavor to pursue improved health care, we know that health care has no national boundaries. And so as we seek to improve the well-being of people around the world, it's important that we reach beyond those national boundaries and that we begin to forge and continue to forge international fellowship and friendship, because research also knows no boundaries. UVA has benefited enormously from this particular friendship and this partnership, and we're grateful to you for that work. We're also grateful to the Valmarana family. Many of you may or may not know the Valmaranas have played a critical role in the School of Architecture, specifically at the University of Virginia. We're indebted to Mario Valmarana and his founding vision for architecture at the University of Virginia. So many of our students at UVA have spent much of their formative time in Venice and in Vicenza as a result of his inspiration to have an international program. So the very first international program at the University of Virginia brought UVA students here to Vicenza and then to Venice. And so our attempt in the 1970s to be an international organization, international institution, began right here. It's with that great honor we're also grateful that many of our students were able to come through the support of the Bicentennial Commission and others. And so I'd like to ask the students from the University of Virginia that are in the audience tonight, if you'd please stand for just a moment, we'd like to recognize you. These are architecture and medical students, and they're very eager to hear the new knowledge. So much of what we do at a university is about the formation of new knowledge, the forging of new horizons in knowledge making, but also in education. And this is a great opportunity for us to do both of those. So with that, I will take my seat. Thank you so much for hosting us. We look forward to the new knowledge that will be part of this new product over the next few years and over the next few days as well. And we're grateful for this opportunity to bring healthcare and architecture together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I second Louis Nelson in welcoming the students of the University of Virginia. At the end, what we do in the University of Padova and the University of Virginia is for the students, because we want to create the next generation of scientists, of architects, of good people, people that will take care of this small planet that hopefully is going to be more and more a blue planet, and also hopefully they will take care of the individual. I think it's important to say that Valmarana is a typical Vicenza name, so I will give Francesco di Valmarana and Bill Sherman the opportunity to introduce the lecture of this evening that will be given by Guido Beltramini, which is direttore del Centro Internazionale di Studi Architettura Andrea Palladio, the CISA, something that has collaborated to the organization of this meeting. And so, please.
Buonasera signori, allora io comincio in italiano e poi devo passare la parola in inglese perché pur essendo Valmarana sono nato a Washington e cresciuto a Charlottesville, ma vorrei ringraziare il professor Nelson per le sue parole molto gentili, ai professori Rosner e Ronco per l'opportunità di questa sera. I'm now going to switch to English. About 60 years ago in the late 50s, a young architect from the Veneto, from Vicenza and Venice, left to go to New York to seek his fortune. He studied there at Columbia University and then settled in Washington, D.C., where he worked for many years as an architect on some projects like the Watergate Complex and the TWA terminal at Reagan International Airport, and raised a family. Not particularly important in the scope of what happens in the world, but for the Valmarana it's a big deal because as a family that's been in this part of the world for over 1,000 years, we really hadn't made it very far from there, and I think he was one of the first to go that far abroad. He was practicing in Washington, D.C. when he was invited to Charlottesville by the then Dean of the School of Architecture, Joseph Bosserman, and a particularly enlightened professor by the name of Freddie Nichols, to come and teach on Palladio, because of course the roots of Jefferson's architecture were in Palladio. And my father went from Washington to Charlottesville and realized that he had in fact found the Veneto in America. If you think the landscape of the Shenandoah Hills, very much like the Prealpi, the vineyards, the university itself, and the town of Charlottesville feels in many respects like Vicenza. And then, of course, the architecture inspired by Palladio that Jefferson had built, not just UVA with its rotonda, but buildings that were no longer in such good condition, like Barboursville and others. And so he moved our family to Charlottesville, and we set up camp there. I'm then going to read a quick quote that my wife, Alexandra, who is another University of Virginia architect and alumnus who's with us here today, suggested was particularly appropriate. And this is by a physician, no less, by the name of Harvey Cushing, you might be familiar with. And Harvey Cushing said something very interesting. He said, "A physician is obligated to consider more than a diseased organ, more even than the whole man. He must view the man in his world." He understood how important it was to not take just the symptom or the disease, but understand why this was happening. And I think when my father arrived at the University of Virginia, he found a fantastic school of architecture, but one that was very focused on architecture. And one of the first things he did, having arrived at UVA in 1971, was in 1975 to bring a group of students from UVA, most of them who had never been outside of the United States of America, here to Vicenza so that they could understand the architecture of Palladio in context. Why did Palladio build the way he did? Why did he use the materials he did? And understand how buildings work not as a structure, but as an environment in which human beings live. And so when the concept of this Congress was brought up, and it was very kindly suggested that my father be considered as part of the founding group of it, in terms of his name, I guess, that I thought that it was immensely appropriate, that he as an individual saw architecture as something much more than design, much more than buildings. He really understood the importance of the human in architecture. In the same way, I think these next few days are going to discuss the importance of the human in medicine, not just the disease. And we're trying to bring these things together and understand how the architecture and medicine revolve around the same element, which is us, people. So with that, I'd like to turn over the microphone to Bill Sherman, who was a co-professor with my father at the University of Virginia, also taught many years here on the Vicenza and Veneto programs. And having resuscitated the Veneto programs now 44 years later, we're delighted to have him here with us again. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Francesco. I have two roles here. My primary role is to introduce our speaker this evening, but I just want to reflect momentarily on the legacy and the importance of Mario di Valmarana's vision of the whole person as a way of thinking about architecture and thinking about the cultural role that architecture plays. I've held many positions at the University of Virginia in the School of Architecture in the Office of the Vice President for Research, but none that I value more highly than having been the first Mario di Valmarana Professor of Architecture at the university. It is passed on to those who lead the program, and Phoebe Chrisman is here as well, who has held that title. The experience for a professor of architecture to spend time
in Vicenza, to see it through the eyes, as I was fortunate to do 20 years ago with Mario de Valmarana, actually 25 years ago nearly. It is transformational, both for the many students who have been through the program and also for those of us fortunate enough on the faculty to have had that experience to work with him. As I mentioned, my primary reason to be here, however, is to introduce Guido Beltramini, who is someone familiar to many here in the audience, I know. About 4 years ago, I had the pleasure to bring a group of students along with Maddalena Shimemi and Howard Burns to the exhibition at the museum of the work of Jefferson and Palladio, which was an extraordinarily inventive presentation of the dialogue, literally the dialogue between Jefferson and Palladio. I contacted our mutual friend Maddalena when I was told that I was going to make this introduction. And she mentioned a couple of things that I should point out. One for the Italian audience, that he has an international academic profile, contributions in English to scientific and academic, in scientific and academic contexts at Columbia, Harvard, Princeton, the Velleitati, Johns Hopkins, the Center for Canadian in Montreal. And for the English audience here, he has an extraordinary sort of double level of scholarship that reaches both the academic community, but is also an ambassador, in a sense, beyond the academic community to the public through television, radio, and other kinds of venues that expand the knowledge, the importance of the disciplines. He, as many of you know, he is the director of CISO, the Centro Internazionale di Studi di Architettura Andrea Palladio, since 1991, with deep apologies for my accent. He was the visiting professor at the University of Ferrara, and in 2008, he was the Craig Hugh Smith visiting professor at the Velleitati in Florence, the Harvard University Center for the Italian Renaissance Studies. Among these, his studies, he studies the history of Renaissance architecture, with a particular emphasis on the Veneto, the art of war, and the culture of the antique in the Renaissance. His curated exhibitions and catalogs at the Biennale in Venice, at the Royal Academy in London, at the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York, and at the National Building Museum in Washington. His book, Palladio Privato, in 2008, has been published in German and English. He was a member of the Board of Trustees of the Canadian Centre for Architecture and of the International Advisory Panel of Architectural History, and the Journal of the Society of Architectural Historians. Please join me in welcoming Guido Beltramini to the stage, and we look forward to his remarks this evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. Before beginning, I would like to say that I am honored and moved to give a lecture in the memory of Mario Valmarana. Here, in front of his son, Francesco, but also in front of his ancestor, Leonardo Valmarana, there in the center, the prince of the Accademia Olimpica, on the day of the first performance in 1585, I would like to pay homage to a great man, an outstanding professor, and a true friend who I dearly miss. There is no such thing as Palladianism, only Palladians. Not one story, but many stories of architects or group of architects who have dialogue with Palladio. In narrating these stories, however, we have to tackle a twofold measurements of a distance. The distance between how Palladio designed his own afterlife and how architects adopted his lesson, and the distance between our own age and the remote past. We look to that past knowing that each given experience of space corresponds to a given experience of the world, different social practices, and different, often unconscious but crucial, metaphysical outlooks. Historically speaking, the more often the Palladian's lives and works are interwoven with specific contexts, the more the relationship with the model emerges in all its complexity and true consistency, revealing unique rather than recurring features. The term Palladianism is handy but loose. In Palladio's lifetime, Vincenzo Scamozzi embarked on a reinterpretation of his language in real time and adapted it to changed economic, social, and political conditions. The visionary invention of the rotonda has the magnificence and the abstraction of a celestial dwelling, a cube surmounted by a hemisphere with 4 identical porches. The exceptional nature of the La Rotonda was immediately grasped by Palladian contemporaries. In a sonnet, his friend Giambattista Maganza speaks of wonder, envy, and amazement on beholding the most stunning project that Palladio had ever designed, because his patron, Paolo Almerico, had left him free to create, had given free rein to his brain. But La Rotonda can hardly be made to meet the needs of our everyday reality. The construction costs rose fourfold, at least for the facades. The internal organization is not efficient, and the central sala poorly lit, only by one oculus in the apex of the dome. Scamozzi's Rocca Pisana, built in 1574, on the other hand, has an impeccable internal organization because the central sala is a hub, providing radial access to all the rooms, while natural light, scientifically studied with optical diagrams, permeated the whole building. Permeates the whole building. Scamozzi probably worked for Palladio and certainly inherited many of his contacts, as well as several projects requiring completion, such as La Rotonda itself or the Teatro Olimpico. In terms of architectural language, Palladio was always Scamozzi's primary reference point. However, in pursuing his own path, Scamozzi went back to the models that had influenced Palladio, Serlio, for example, and from there he started to develop in a personal way the elements in the architectural orders, the width of the facade, and the types. What changes even more radically is Scamozzi's approach to designing. Scamozzi, having trained in libraries and not on building sites like Palladio, began by creating a primarily theoretical system in his work as an architect, starting from the Vitruvian definition, architectura est scientia. Accordingly, the architect should not proceed by inventing, rather by offering precise solutions to the various problems. Solutions based on the solid theoretical premises and the result of a rational design process. This rationality implies an attention to purpose, to the efficiency of the building as a machine for living in, to practical construction solution and controlled costs. Scamozzi, thus, turned Palladio's poetry into prose and this facilitated its translation in distant countries and different contexts. Indeed, it was precisely this Palladian Scamossianism that conquered Northern Europe and then crossed the oceans in the wake of the British Empire. The exterior of Lord Burlington's Chiswick was the result of his studying of the Vicentine school. The facade comes from Palladio Villa Foscari. The rear was inspired by one of Palladio's drawings, but the sides are from Scamozzi's Villa Molin, and the dome emulates the cupola of the Rocca Pisani. The strength of Chiswick, however, does not lie in citations, but in the unexpected variety of the interiors, new compared to the Palladian Scamozzian models, and the startling inversion of the dimension of elements that should have been subordinate, whereas they are actually large and dominant, such as the external staircase or the enormous obelisk chimney stacks. The genealogical tree of eminent Palladians starts with two of his children, Scamozzi and Inigo Jones. They continued with the master's research, assimilating his method and knowledge of the antique. Jones met Scamozzi and studied his architecture during his trip to Italy and in the Veneto in 1613-1614. Jones visited several of Palladio's buildings, recording his impressions in a copy of the Quattro Libri, still in the Worcester College Library. Jones may well have taken a large number of drawings by Palladio back to England, which for centuries were to be the gold reserves of the English architecture. Jones had a more eclectic approach than Scamozzi. Jones' models, alongside Palladio, are the ancient and contemporary Roman architecture of his time. Significantly, however, in one of his major projects, the Banqueting House in London, Jones actually constructs what was a piece of paper architecture, the Egyptian room, published by Palladio in the Quattro Libri, but never built. This is the building, and this is the page of the 4 books. In this case, Palladio is to Jones exactly what Vitruvius was to Palladio. Jones begins with a well-defined type adopted to his own needs, and then, using other Palladian examples, he flexibly solves specific problems without losing sight of the initial model. In this way, he achieves an unprecedented result, a personal, original development of the chosen Palladian model. Another figure of great importance in this first generation of Palladians was not an architect but a theoretician, Henry Wotton, the English ambassador to Venice and early collector of Palladio's drawings. His essay, The Element of Architecture, 1624, shaped a new Italophile architectural culture in Britain and Holland. Constantine Huygens, another cosmopolitan intellectual, this time Dutch, has visited the building of Palladio and Jones, and with the architect Jacob van Kampen, tricked off an architectural revolution inspired mainly by Scamozzi. In Britain, John Webb, to whom Jones entrusted his Palladian drawings, was a link between the generation of natural or adoptive sons and the grandchildren, dominated by Lord Burlington, who came to Italy and discovered more Palladian drawings. Burlington supported architects like William Kent and promoted publication, including the complete English translation of the Quattro Libri. By the second half of the 18th century, Palladio was a British product, even when in demand in Catherine II's Russia, where Charles Cameron and Giacomo Quarenghi, this is Quarenghi, Charles Cameron and Giacomo Quarenghi worked. Meantime, the first book of survey of building published by Muttoni arrived from Italy and spread the knowledge of new buildings and drawings not included in the 4 books, in the Quattro Libri. Lastly, Thomas Jefferson, an ingenious amateur architect, was to make Palladio the foundation of the New World architecture. Palladio was important in many ways for Jefferson, but although he was certainly a key model among his reference, he was far from being the only one, given the equally important influence of American vernacular traditions or British and French 18th century architecture. Certainly, unlike many Palladians, Jefferson did not just look at the illustrations of the 4 books, but also read the text very carefully. And in Italian, given that the name Monticello derives from the word used by Palladio in the Quattro Libri to describe the small hill, a hillock in the text, where the rotonda stands. By reading the Quattro Libri, the 4 books of architecture, Jefferson grasped how the real purpose of the Palladian barchesse, adjoint outhouses, was to meet the requirements of farm work, shed for cars and implements, animal stalls, and wine cellars. And we also find these uses in Monticello, unlike other Neo-Palladian British or American buildings, where the barchesse are simple covered passage joining up various parts of the house. Likewise, by reading the description of the Villa Cornaro at Piombino Dese in the 4 books, Jefferson could check out a practical example of the concatenation difficult, of individual elements and rooms in a sequence of ratios, a founding element in Palladio's architectural system. Moreover, Jefferson turned to Palladio as the architect who made available ancient Roman architecture for contemporary use. We might say that Palladio translated architectural Latin from the dead language of the ruins into the living language of the architects. In the early years of his career, when Jefferson had not yet left America, he knew about and used the language of ancient Roman buildings through the surveys published in the 3rd and 4th books of the Quattro Libri. In his Parisian years, Jefferson became familiar with the world of archaeologists and antiquaries and, through them, formed a more accurate analytical view of the reality of the ruins. Yet, when he came to design the rotunda, this is the Parisian years, if you remember the film. Yet, when he came to design the rotunda at the University of Virginia, Jefferson chose Palladio's version of the Corinthian Pantheon for a model, not the one described by the new science of archaeology. I quote Jefferson's words, "I have examined carefully all the ancient Corinthians in my professions and observed that Palladio, as usual, has given the finest members of them all in the happiest combination." The Palladians were usually educated gentlemen and scholarly architects, at times both, rarely neither. Their tool of knowledge and action was not only the drawing table, but also the book. Palladio's autograph drawings, brought to England by Wotton and Jones in the early 17th century, were the keystone of the new culture. Their style was imitated and they were handed on from one architect to another, expanded and made available through publications. Some Palladians had direct experience of the master's buildings because they grew up with them, like Vincenzo Scamozzi, or they studied them firsthand, like Jones, Burlington, or Quarenghi. Others only knew them through the Quattro Libri and felt no compulsion to visit them on their Italian journeys, like Jefferson. Over the centuries, some models were replicated to the letter on the basis of the Quattro Libri, such as the Rotonda in Campbell's Maryworth and the Palazzo Valmarana in Potsdam, or on the basis of Palladio's autograph drawing for unbuilt projects, such as the General Wade House by Burlington in London. Some models were to be as distorted as was the case with the buildings designed by the Italian Francesco Muttoni. He had a thorough knowledge of Palladio's work. In fact, he was responsible for a new edition of the Quattro Libri in 1740s. In his own architecture, however, Muttoni had a particularly free, creative approach, unique among the Palladians. Muttoni always started from a quote from a model by the master. For example, the atrium of Palazzo Trento Valmarana again tonight, this evening, is a reinterpretation of the large three-nave atrium of Palazzo Barbarano. Muttoni, however, distorts the Palladian space by squashing it downwards, lowering the mighty vaults to make a flat ceiling, and expanding the space out of all proportions. The same is true for Palazzo Velo, a 2.0 version of Palladio's Palazzo Chiericati, or his church of San Vincenzo in Vicenza, in which the Olimpic semicircular screen of columns in the presbytery of the Redentore becomes a tense mixtilinear fragment. On a diametrically opposed approach, the Vicenza-based Ottone Calderari thought that Palladio's architecture was so perfect that new buildings could only be constructed by reassembling parts of them in various combinations, which is what he did in more than a dozen villas and palazzi in the Vicenza area. The Russian Ivan Zoltowski, 1 century later, on the other hand, expressed his love of Palladio in an even more radical way by building Moscow copies of Palladian building, such as his Tarasov house, an exact replica of Palazzo Tiene, still existing in Moscow, or the house in Moscoia Street based on the loggia of the Capitaniato. But for many other Palladians, Palladio was simply the architect who had translated ancient buildings for the modern world, a kind of timeless architectural divinity outside of history. At the beginning of the second of the Quattro Libri, in the wake of Serlio, Palladio established a precise relationship between the appearance of buildings and the social rank of the owner, from lords to lawyers and merchants. The specific form of government in Venice until 1797, one of the few republics in a Europe of monarchies, provided a contrast between the courtiers and the ruling elite made up of gentiluomini who built their own palaces without the pomp of princes and lived in a country where they pursued their interests, led a healthy life, and cultivated the spirit by reading the classics. Palladio was their architect, and his villas were the setting for their model of life, obviously inspired by the ancient Rome. This certainly did not go unobserved by the liberal British aristocrats in the early 18th century who admired the Venetian Constitution, or by Jefferson in his quest for a Republican architecture to be adopted as a model for the new United States, which had emerged victoriously from the conflict with monarchical Britain. Like Léon Baptiste Alberti and Le Corbusier, Palladio was an architect who wanted to change the world and wrote a book of instruction on how it was to be done. In the Quattro Libri, Palladio conceived and communicated architecture as a system capable of conveying the mathematics of ancient Roman architecture, made up of construction units, room, colonnades, stairs, portals, windows, bound by rules, types, and ratios. But how many of these elements have stood the test of time? Not the plans. They were dependent on the uses of the buildings and on the contexts. In the Veneto tradition before Palladio, the floor plans of houses and villas had a long central hall that developed from the front to the rear with, on the other side of it, rooms of equal size facing each other. The new feature of Palladio's plans was that he created suites in harmoniously proportioned series of concatenated rectangular and square rooms, 24 to 16, 16 to 16, 16 to 12 feet. The red, the blue, and with these glasses I can see, and maybe orange, something like this. These molecules series of basic units are arranged around the central hall, and in general, the smallest sized room is the point of arrival of a sequence of increasingly private rooms. The sequence, however, obliges you to go through all the rooms to reach the last room, with no corridors or lobbies, and therefore with no privacy. This was unthinkable in 18th century Britain, never mind Jefferson's Monticello, in which even the system for conveying food was designed to avoid or minimize contact between the owners and the domestic servants. This explains why Palladio's architectural system was gradually reduced to a language that further boiled down to a statement of belonging to a culture, expressed in individual elements, such as the pronaos, the porch, on columns on the facade, portals or Serliana windows. Even the Quattro Libri were superseded by the pragmatism of pattern books. Palladio's lesson, however, is like the fossil light of a dead star, which continues to shine independently from the fact that it has ceased to exist. One moving example of a tacit memory of Palladio occurred when freed American slaves returned to Africa in the mid-19th century, and they built from memory the mansions of their former masters using local materials. In Liberia, they rejected the circular plan time of the native dwellings and built houses with rectangular plans, pediments, and front and rear porches, typical of the Neo-Palladian mansions on American plantations. In ancient Rome, Vitruvius pointed to primitive wooden huts as a model for stone temple. The triangular pediment of a temple was used by Lorenzo the Magnificent and Giuliano da Sangallo to crown the entrance to the villa at Poggio Reale, at Poggio Acaiano, in 15th century Tuscany, and this was the first Renaissance buildings to revive the ancient Roman villa. 70 years later, it became a typical feature of the villas that Palladio designed in the Veneto. In the 17th century, the Palladian villa emigrates to the English countryside and then crossed the Atlantic to become plantation houses. But from there, the gable went to Africa. and on the facade of their poor dwellings, the freed slaves set the porch on columns from the plantation houses of their former owners. Thank you very much.
So thank you very, very much. We're going to have some presents for our guests that I will deliver later on. We have a special acquerello designed from Tony Vedou, who has been provided by Gilberto Padovan kindly. And also we will have a special etching describing this meeting with La Rotonda and La Rotunda together, painted by Galliano Rosset and printed in the Antica Stamperia Busato. I will deliver this to you later. I think this concludes the opening ceremony. We will have a small concert now, so I will ask the technicians to remove the screen. Maybe you want to join the gala of the theater to enjoy the concert. In between, I'd like to make a special thank, especially to Carrie Evans, who has been really instrumental in receiving and sending hundreds or thousands of email back and forward with our organizer here, Gioia Vencato, and Anna Saccardo and Marta Scabardi, who really made possible this meeting. I also would like to thank the municipality of Vicenza that offered the concert tonight, and the Provincia di Vicenza, of course, and the Regione Veneto, which is our regional government, our land. It is the land where all these villas actually reside. And with this, I think it will be important to tell you that the musical performance, which will be directed by Franco Poloni, is from the Conservatorio Arrigo Pedrollo here in Vicenza, and the title of the concert will be the Petite Symphonie by Charles Gounod. With this, I thank you very much. I leave the word to a universal language, which is music. I think it's interesting that this morning in the University of Padova, the Vice Provost of the University of Virginia mentioned the liberty of thinking as one of the main values of the academic institution. Our university has a specific emblem that includes the words Universa Universis Patavina Libertas. I just would like to point out that this is the second oldest university in Italy. The first is Bologna. But why Bologna was a university run by the Pope? Padova was born as a free university paid by the parents of the students. This means freedom of science, which is something that really belongs to our DNA. We are scientists, we want to be free in our thinking. And this is why Galileo Galilei could come to Padova to say that probably is not the sun that goes around the earth, but rather the opposite. Thank you very much.
you.